On Christmas morning, she stood by the fire in her red wool sweater and dropped the mortgage payment on my lap. Then, without blinking, she said it, loud enough for the kids to hear, "You're a burden. We're done here. If you've ever been pushed aside by your own family, keep listening. My name's Walter James. I'm 68 years old, retired from teaching, and I live in Buffalo, New York, right near Elmwood Village. It had snowed the night before, thick and silent, the kind of snow that makes even the loudest city block sound like a church at midnight. The kids had woken up early, pajamas twisted from sleep, hair sticking in every direction, squealing over stockings, tearing ribbons with reckless joy, wrapping paper curled like red and green waves on the rug. The fireplace crackled, the scent of pine needles and cinnamon coffee filled the room, and Bing Crosby's voice drifted low from the old speaker on the shelf. For a moment, I thought we were safe. For a moment, it felt like peace. Then she broke it. Lexi didn't raise her voice. She never did. She didn't need to. She stood in the middle of the living room like she'd rehearsed it, one manicured hand on her hip, the other dangling the envelope like it was trash she couldn't be bothered to carry a step farther. The envelope hit my lap with a dull thud, sharp only because the room had gone so still. "Payment's due," she said, her tone casual, but her eyes locked on mine, "and we won't be needing you here much longer." The children froze, ribbons clutched in their fists. My son looked at his lap as though the carpet had suddenly become fascinating. Not a word from anyone. Only the pop of burning wood in the hearth and the scrape of a toy truck being nudged aside by a nervous little hand. I lowered my gaze. December mortgage, $1,743.82 due. I knew the numbers by heart. I had paid them every month for 17 years. Through the lean years, through Ruth's illness, through retirement. Even after she passed, I kept paying. Out of duty, out of memory, out of love. When I lifted my eyes, Lexi's were waiting. No fury, no shame, just calculation. I didn't ask why, didn't protest, didn't give her the fight she wanted. I folded the paper once, slid it back into the envelope, and stood. My legs shook, but not from age, from the cold clarity of betrayal. I left without a word. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer a man can give. Elmwood Village wore its usual holiday hush that morning. Buffalo in winter is like a painting under glass, muted, fragile, almost unreal. The streets were coated in white, cars half buried, lamplight still glowing against the pale air. Each step crunched sharp beneath my boots, the sound swallowed almost immediately by the snow. I didn't have a destination, I just walked. The wind stung my cheeks, ice caught in my mustache. I let the cold gnaw at me. It felt cleaner than the heat of shame sitting in my chest. I passed. Talking Leaves bookstore, Ruth's favorite. Closed for the holiday, windows frosted over, a paper star sagging in the display. I crossed the stone bridge at Bidwell Parkway, its railings caked in ice. A man tugged his retriever through the slush and gave me a polite nod. I nodded back, forcing a tight smile. He didn't know me. He didn't need to. They say Christmas brings families together, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it pulls the curtain back, and the stage lights show you the truth you've been ignoring. And my truth was sitting there in that living room. Lexi, with her smug calm, announcing to her children and mine that I was a burden. It didn't matter that this house had my name on the deed. Didn't matter that I'd co-signed the mortgage, carried it when my son couldn't. Didn't matter that Ruth and I had built our life there. Every coat of paint, every squeaky stair, every dent in the floorboards telling a piece of our story. Even the dent by the fireplace. Ruth's cane had slipped one icy December. She laughed that night, cheeks pink with embarrassment. But I remember catching her before she fell fully. I remember holding her weight, thinking how light she'd gotten, thinking how fragile life becomes. Lexi never saw that part, or maybe she did and didn't care. She wanted control, and the only way to have it was to erase me. That night, my room upstairs felt like a boarding house chamber, not a grandfather's place in his own home. The snow stacked high on the sill, muffling even the hum of traffic. I sat in my chair, watching flakes tumble under the glow of the streetlight. No knock at my door, no whisper of "Merry Christmas, Grandpa." The kids didn't sneak in with cocoa or cookies. Even my son stayed away, his silence more brutal than any words. It wasn't always like this. When Ruth was alive, Lexi played her part differently. She smiled more, softer around the edges. She asked for recipes. She laughed at my corny jokes. I even carved the turkey once at Thanksgiving. Ruth's presence commanded respect. Even Lexi, for all her sharpness, bent under it. But when Ruth died, something in Lexi shifted, as though a shadow lifted and revealed her real shape. At first, it was subtle. My name missing from return labels. My email quietly removed from bill notifications. Her saying, "Relax, Walt." "We've got it now," I told myself not to argue. Grief makes you weary. You start letting small things slide because raising your voice feels heavier than silence. But silence lets weeds grow, and Lexi was a weed that thrived in shade. The next morning I shuffled into the kitchen, robe cinched at the waist, slippers dragging. The mortgage envelope was gone from the counter. In its place, a note, red marker, block letters, Christmas cleanup. Dishes, tree needles, Grandpa's room. 3 bullets, 3 commands. No please, no name. Just Grandpa's room, like I was an item to tidy up after the holidays. I didn't touch the paper. I stared at it until the marker fumes bit my nose, then turned away. I brewed a pot of coffee, my beans, my ritual. The canister still had Ruth's handwriting on the label, Waltz. I measured slowly, listening to the grinder hum. The small defiance gave me strength. I carried my mug to the back porch, sat in the cold, watched the snow sparkle under the weak sun. Steam rose from my cup, vanishing into the air like everything else that had once been mine. Eventually, my son joined me. "Hey, Dad." His voice was tentative, the way a boy speaks when he's about to wound you but wishes he didn't have to. "Morning," I said, eyes on the snow. I wasn't going to make it easy. He shifted his weight, breath clouding. "Lexi, she just meant we've got a lot going on. Money's tight. Maybe it's time to talk about what's next." "What's next?" I repeated, tasting the bitterness. The words hung between us like smoke. He nodded quickly, eyes darting. "You've always said you wanted to travel. Maybe now's the time. Travel. At 68, with creaky knees and no wife to share a hotel bed." I thought about the time I bailed him out with my pension when he wrecked the Camry. About the funeral I missed, so he and Lexi could have their spa weekend in the Catskills. My travel had always been cleaning up after him. "Maybe now's the time," he said again. I didn't answer. I stared at the snowbank swallowing the porch rail. He went back inside, relieved I hadn't fought. But inside, I was done bending. That night, after the house settled, I unlocked the fireproof box in my closet. My fingers found the manila folder by touch alone. I laid the deed on the desk under the lamp. There it was. My name, Walter James. Clear as day. Still co-owner. Still tied to the walls. The beams. The very foundation. They hadn't removed me. They couldn't. Not without my consent. They had only assumed I'd roll over. I poured myself a scotch, amber liquid glowing in the glass, and studied the paper like it was a treasure map. And maybe it was. Not a map out, but a map through. Because if Lexi thought I was a burden, then maybe it was time to show her what a burden with a plan could do. Some betrayals don't show up in a single act. They bloom slow, like mold behind the walls. Lexi's power plays weren't always obvious, not at first. But once you noticed the pattern, you couldn't unsee it. She had a talent for carving at the edges of a man's life without leaving a single visible wound. It began subtly, the way erosion always does. First, my books disappeared from the living room shelves. One by one, gone. The spines I'd chosen over decades. History, literature, poetry. Ruth loved to read aloud in winter. vanished as though they had no place there. I asked about it once. "Oh, I think it clashed with the new color scheme," she said, her smile bright, rehearsed as if she were doing me a kindness. I didn't argue. But 2 days later, reaching into the pantry for pasta, I found Ruth and me staring back from the dust, our photo frame shoved sideways behind a row of linguine boxes, the glass smudged, the wood chipped, face down, hidden like an embarrassment. She hadn't thrown it away, she had buried it. That was Lexi in a nutshell. There were other signs. Little ones at first, but every little one added up. My chair at the dining table had always been the head, Ruth's across from mine. Tradition. Her spot faced the window, where she loved to watch the maples in fall, the icicles in winter. After she passed, I kept my place, out of habit, out of respect. But one Sunday dinner, I came downstairs and found a tall glass vase of fake lilies sitting squarely in my seat. My chair was gone, pushed against the wall. "Where should I sit?" I asked, pausing with my hands braced on the back of another chair. Lexi didn't even look up. "Oh, we thought it'd be better if you sat next to the kids." Easier to pass things down, so I sat 3 places down, like a guest. A guest in the house I'd bought, in the family I'd carried through storms. And my son? He let it happen. He passed the mashed potatoes without meeting my eyes. I can't pinpoint when it shifted. He used to call me every Saturday without fail, even after he married. He'd ask about the Camry when it wouldn't start in the cold, about his taxes, about the best snow routes to his office. But little by little, Lexi started answering for him. A text, "He's in a meeting." Another, "We've got a busy weekend. Can it wait?" It always could wait. Until eventually he stopped calling at all. I told myself he was busy. I told myself Lexi was helping. But deep down, I knew I was losing him. That's what I always did, make excuses for other people's neglect. Then came the mail. One afternoon, I opened the box and found it strangely empty. No pension notice, no utility bills, no bank statement. That evening, I spotted the envelopes tossed in Lexi's car, crumpled on the passenger seat, some half opened. When I asked, she tilted her head, smiling sweetly. "Just trying to sort things faster, Walt." From then on, the mailbox key dangled on her ring. My name stopped appearing on statements. Utility bills came addressed to James' family household. Cold, vague, deliberate. Piece by piece, I was being erased, not with violence, not even with confrontation, but with quiet efficiency. One night, I overheard her. I had risen for water and paused by the kitchen. She stood with her back to me, phone pressed to her ear, voice low but confident. "No, it's not a legal problem," she whispered. "It's just complicated. He's technically still on the mortgage, but he's not going to fight. Trust me, he's tired. He won't push back." She laughed softly. "It's more about optics, you know? We just need him to leave on his own. Then we can move forward." Move forward. With what? Selling the house? Renting it out? Replacing me with a tenant who didn't groan climbing the stairs? For the first time, I believed it. They didn't just want me quiet. They wanted me gone. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started paying closer attention. In the study desk drawer, beneath Ruth's old stationery, I found 2 envelopes. One stamped Home Equity Options, the other unopened from a local senior living facility. Inside the second was a glossy brochure, warm colors, smiling retirees, words like dignity through transition and luxury assisted living for active retirees. On the back, in blue pen, someone had circled a room rate, $4,890 per month. Scribbled beside it, "Ask about January 1st move-in." I held that brochure until my knuckles went white. They'd already penciled in my exile, already chosen the month, and still, I said nothing. But that night, I didn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling fan's slow blades, remembering all the years I'd carried this family. The pneumonia that nearly leveled me, Ruth nursing me with cool cloths and whispered prayers. The year my son's scholarship ran dry and I signed over part of my pension to keep him in school. The retirement trip to Europe Ruth and I dreamed of, canceled because Lexi was too anxious with a newborn. I had done what men of my generation were taught to do: put family first, always. But in this house, strung with LED lights and digital photo frames, I was no longer family. I was an inconvenience, a problem to be solved. 2 days after Christmas, Lexi entered my room without knocking. I was reading, lamp low. She stood in the doorway, arms folded, her perfume sharp in the air. "I scheduled an appointment for you," she said. I lowered the book. "Appointment?" She crossed the room, handed me a folded sheet. The address was the same as the brochure. "Just a tour," she said lightly. "Nothing final." I stared at the page. Did I ask for this? Her smile didn't waver. "We just thought it might be nice for you." More peace, more structure. We? Her and my son. My son who once called me every Saturday. She left before I could respond. The door clicked shut like a gavel. That's when I realized I wasn't part of their conversation anymore. I was the subject of it. The next morning I picked up the phone, not to confirm, to cancel. Then I dialed another number, one I hadn't called in years, a lawyer. Because if they were already writing me out, I wasn't going quietly. The law office was just a few blocks off Elmwood, a quiet brick building, second floor with brass lettering on the door and that faint smell of fresh paint trying to cover years of old paper and dust. The kind of place where time moves slow, like each hour has weight. His name was Henry Costello. Back in the day, Ruth and I used to play racquetball with him at the community center. He had a wicked backhand and a laugh that echoed off the walls. We lost touch after Ruth passed, but when I called, when I gave him the short, clipped version of what was happening, he didn't hesitate. "Walter," he said, voice steady, "come in tomorrow morning and bring every document you've got." So I did. I brought everything I could carry in a weathered leather briefcase: the original deed, my co-signer forms, decades of bank statements showing mortgage payments drafted from my account, utility bills with my name in black ink, old insurance documents. I stacked them on his desk like I was building a wall of proof. Henry adjusted his glasses and began to comb through the papers. His pen tapped against the desk now and then, but otherwise he read in silence. My pulse thudded in my ears. Every rustle of paper sounded like a verdict. 15 minutes passed before he finally leaned back, exhaling through his nose. He looked me in the eye. "You've got more leverage than you think." And just like that, something inside me shifted. I wasn't powerless. I was patient. And patience, when paired with evidence, is lethal. Over the next week, I stayed quiet. Lexi thought her Christmas ambush had landed. She strutted through the house with that clipped tone of hers, already rearranging what she now called the reading nook, my room. My recliner? Gone. "Donated," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The bookshelf where I kept Ruth's cookbooks? Cleared, replaced with a rolled yoga mat and scented candles. I didn't complain. I watched. Every morning I brewed my coffee the way I always had. Careful, deliberate. Every night I closed my door early, as if retreating. I played the part of the docile old man who'd accepted his fate. "Thank you. You're right. I understand." Words that felt like chalk in my mouth, but I said them anyway. They thought they were writing my exit. What I was really doing was writing the final act of my own. Then came the twist. It wasn't planned. It wasn't part of Henry's advice. It happened by accident. Lexi left her laptop open on the dining table one evening. She and my son were upstairs, wrangling the kids into a bath, the sound of splashing and laughter echoing faintly through the floorboards. I wasn't looking for anything. I was only reaching for my glasses, but the screen caught my eye. An open Gmail tab. Bold subject line preview. Lease draft for 2024 occupancy. I shouldn't have clicked it, but I did. The email was from a realtor I knew by name. Local. The same man who'd sold the house across the street last spring. Attached was a PDF. My hand trembled as I double-clicked. A full lease agreement filled the screen. Rent set at $2,100 a month. The upstairs bedroom, the one I slept in every night, listed as available with private bath. Move in, ready. They had already drafted the paperwork. They had already placed me in ink outside of my own home. And the start date? February 1st. A deadline stamped on my back. I didn't rage. I didn't shout. I printed the email in silence. Thick paper, ink still warm, edges sharp enough to cut. I slid it onto my son's nightstand after dinner, left it there like a stone dropped in still water. That night, the knock came. His silhouette filled my doorway, paper clutched in his hand. His eyes were red, whether from anger or shame I couldn't tell. Dad, his voice cracked. I didn't know she sent this already. I looked at him. Really looked. This was the boy I'd carried on my shoulders at the county fair, who gripped my fingers on his first day of kindergarten, who once cried over tying his first Windsor knot. Now he couldn't even look me in the eye. You knew about the plan, I said. He nodded, slow, as though the weight of that small motion might break him. I didn't want it to go this way, but you let it. Silence stretched between us. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Finally, he whispered, I needed to protect my family. I nodded once, calm, cold. So do I. And I closed the door. That night, I didn't sleep. But it wasn't the restless tossing of weakness. It was a different kind of wakefulness, the kind that sharpens a man, the kind that strips away hesitation and leaves only clarity. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns out. I was precise. They had underestimated me. A few days later, Henry called. His tone was brisk, energized. I've drafted the transfer papers, he said. You're still on the deed. That means you can move your ownership share into a living trust. No notice required. I leaned against the kitchen counter, the phone warm against my ear. And who do I transfer it to? Anyone you choose, Henry said, as long as they have legal standing. You could even assign it to a minor through a custodial designation. Provided you name a guardian, I let the words settle. Then I smiled, the first real smile I'd felt in weeks. I knew exactly who. My granddaughter, Emily, 10 years old, big brown eyes that missed nothing, a mouth that never stops running. She loved puzzles, crosswords, riddles, anything that needed patience and cleverness, and she loved me. Not politely, not out of obligation, purely. She still called me Papa. She still tiptoed into my room with contraband cookies, giggling when I pretended not to notice the crumbs on the blanket. She still curled into my lap with a book, unconcerned if I drifted off mid-story. To her, I wasn't a burden. I wasn't an inconvenience. I was her grandfather, her anchor. If anyone deserved my share of the house, it was Emily. I would set up a trust, transfer my ownership to her name, let Lexi wake one morning to discover the crown she thought she wore was already in someone else's hands. But timing was everything. I circled a date on the calendar, December 31st, New Year's Eve, symbolic. 1 year ends, another begins. The line between endings and beginnings always mattered to Ruth. It felt right. In the days leading up, I played my role to perfection. At dinner, I smiled politely. I offered to pass the salt. I nodded at Lexi's complaints about the heater. I even thanked her once for handling things. She glowed under the illusion, smug in her victory, the queen of a kingdom she didn't realize was already slipping through her fingers. The night before the transfer, I sat with Emily in the sunroom, just us. The snow fell thick beyond the glass, flakes tumbling under the halo of the street lamp. She leaned against me, her breath fogging the window as she traced patterns with her finger. "Do you trust me, kiddo?" I asked quietly. She turned, brows knitting. "Of course," I smiled, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Then someday when you're old enough, there's going to be a surprise waiting for you. Something important. Something that's yours." Her eyes widened. "Like a treasure?" she whispered. "Exactly like a treasure," I said, voice steady. She giggled, the sound like bells. She didn't understand, not yet. But one day she would. December 31st arrived like a blade wrapped in ribbon, the kind of day that looks soft on the outside but cuts when you touch it. The house was quiet, too quiet for a holiday. Lexi had gone out early, the sound of her boots clipping down the walkway still echoing in my head. She was shopping for party supplies. Lexi never needed much of a reason to host. My son was in the basement, fiddling with the speakers, wires sprawled out like veins on the carpet. Upstairs, the kids were shrieking at some cartoon game, their laughter and cries bouncing through the vents like ghosts of the childhood I once gave their father. I sat alone at the kitchen table, steam curled up from a mug of black coffee, strong enough to sting the nose. In my coat pocket, tucked against my ribs, was a manila envelope. Inside that envelope was the future. My future. Lexi's future, Emily's future, and none of them were the same anymore. At 9:45 sharp, I stepped into Henry's office. The waiting room smelled faintly of lemon polish and printer ink. Outside, snow fell in heavy clumps, the kind that stick to your coat collar. Inside, the air was still, charged. Henry looked up when I entered, his smile quick and warm but edged with seriousness. He stood, shook my hand firmly, and motioned me to sit. "It's all ready," he said, sliding a crisp document across the table. His eyes flicked toward the paper like a chess player about to end a match. I pulled it closer. The title at the top in bold letters. Transfer of ownership via living trust. My 50% stake in the house. Reassigned. Rebuilt. Redirected. The beneficiary. Emily Rose James. Custodial rights until she turned 18 were given not to Lexi, not even to my son, but to Ruth's cousin, Marianne, a woman who lived 2 states away and who never once suffered. Fools. She adored Ruth. She tolerated me. But Lexi? She never liked her games. Lexi wouldn't be able to whisper her way past Marianne. She wouldn't be able to charm or intimidate. Without an attorney, she wouldn't even get a return call. I took a pen out of my pocket, dark green engraved with Ruth's initials. My hand trembled, but not from age, from the weight of the moment. I signed, one careful stroke after another. Then I pushed the paper back to Henry. "That's it?" I asked, my voice steady. He nodded. "That's it?" Before I left, I asked for one more thing. "A certified copy," I said. "Overnight mail. It should land on their porch." New Year's morning, Henry tilted his head, then grinned. "A fresh start." "Exactly," I said. Back at the house, the air was loud with Lexi's voice. She bustled through the kitchen, barking instructions, her bracelets clinking like warning bells. "Can you take these champagne bottles to the garage fridge?" she snapped at my son. "And those dumb boxes on the porch? Move them before people trip." She glanced at me briefly, eyes sliding past like I was a shadow in the corner. I offered to help. She waved me off. "No, no, just go rest or whatever." Like I was an old dog, better left in the corner. I nodded. Slowly climbed the stairs, one hand brushing the railing. Not weakness. Calculation. At the top step, I turned, looked down at her, watched the way she moved, commanding a space that was never truly hers. She didn't notice. Not yet. That evening, I packed. Not everything. Just the things that mattered. A handful of shirts, my shaving kit, a framed photo of Ruth, smiling at me from a summer long gone, my journals, and my mother's antique watch, the one she gave me the day I left for college. At 10 p.m., I closed the zipper, set the bag by the door, and called for a cab. By 10:30, I was gone. The tires hissed over fresh snow as the car pulled away from the curb. No note, no text, no goodbye, just silence. Let her wake to absence. And mail. New Year's morning, 7:42 a.m. I pictured her clearly, Lexi in her robe, hair knotted up, annoyance already etched on her face as the knock rattled the door. She would shuffle across the tile, pen in hand, sign for the envelope without a second thought. Then she would slit it open. Not party invitations, not holiday cards. The deed, the trust certificate, the proof of her defeat. Stamped, certified, irreversible. She would read it once, then again, and again. Each time, her fingers tightening, her breath sharpening, her pulse racing as the truth carved its way in. She no longer owned half the house. Her daughter did, through a trust she couldn't touch, controlled by a guardian she couldn't bend. I imagined the scream, sharp, raw, torn from the gut, followed by the frantic pacing of bare feet on cold tile. Her phone would be in her hand within minutes. She would call my son. He wouldn't answer. She would call the attorney listed, out of office, holiday hours. She would call me. I'd let it ring, then block the number. 2 days later, my son showed up at my condo. The glass door rattled under his knuckles, but he didn't knock right away. He just stood there, hands buried in his coat pockets, shoulders slumped, his breath fogging the pain. When he finally tapped, I let him in. He didn't greet me, didn't smile, just walked in, looked around the sparse space, bare walls, borrowed furniture, the smell of coffee lingering, and sat down across from me at the small table. "What did you do?" he asked, voice low, tired. I sipped my coffee. "What I had to." "She's furious," he said. "I bet." He rubbed his face. The lines around his eyes looked deeper than I remembered. "You blindsided us." I leaned back. "No, you stopped seeing me. I just stopped waiting for your permission." The silence between us stretched long, heavy. Finally, he asked, "Is there any way to reverse it?" I met his eyes. "Why?" "So she can rent out your daughter's future. You stood there while she erased me. What makes you think she won't erase Emily next?" He flinched. His shoulders sagged. "She's not evil," he whispered. "Just intense." "She's calculating," I said evenly, "and now she's not in control anymore." He nodded once, stared at the floor, then stood and left. No goodbye. Lexi tried everything in the weeks that followed. She called Marianne, the trustee, got blocked. She stormed into Henry's office, walked out with nothing. She mailed letters, sent threats, then pleas. None of it mattered. The trust was bulletproof, untouchable, and she couldn't move an inch without going through Emily. And Emily was 10 years old, a 10-year-old who loved her papa. I saw her a week later. My son brought her by quietly, without warning. She ran through the door like a beam of sunlight, wrapping her arms around me, her cheek pressed hard against my chest. "Mom's mad," she whispered into my shirt, "but I don't care. I missed you." My throat tightened, but I managed to hug her back, steady, firm. She pulled away just long enough to unfold a piece of paper from her pocket. A drawing in crayon, our house, the porch, a crooked tree, me on the steps, her in the yard, at the bottom in her careful, uneven handwriting. "Ours now." There's a silence that follows revenge, not the kind that aches, the kind that settles, like snow falling on a city that's finally stopped moving. I never went back to the house, not once. Buffalo stayed the same, cold, gray, heavy with winter. But in that quiet condo near Hoyt Lake, I began waking up to a clarity I hadn't felt in years. No footsteps stomping overhead, no sharp voices echoing down stairwells, no bills whisked away before I could reach for them. Only the low hum of the radiator, the occasional groan of pipes settling against the frost, and my own breathing, for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was inhabiting my own life again. The news about the trust spread faster than I expected. Lexi tried to smother it, of course, tried to control the story like she controlled everything else. But rumors have a way of slipping under doors, and paperwork has a way of showing up where it's least convenient. Her friends stopped visiting, invitations dried up, even some of the in-laws, who once paraded her around as the perfect daughter-in-law, started asking quiet questions. Because if you build your reputation on appearances, the last thing you want is a legal document proving you never had control in the first place. And Emily, she flourished. Every weekend she came by with her backpack, stuffed with puzzles, chapter books, and a mess of glitter pens that left trails of sparkle across my coffee table. She didn't care about trust funds or property rights. She cared that Papa had a porch swing, that Papa made cinnamon toast the real way, butter melted edge to edge, sugar caramelized under the broiler, that Papa always said yes to one more episode, even when her parents had said no. One night, during a snowstorm, she fell asleep on the couch with a book half open in her lap. I draped my old wool blanket over her small frame, careful not to wake her, and sat nearby for a long while, watching her breathe, listening to the storm lash against the windows. I understood something. The house didn't matter. The walls, the bricks, the mantel, all of it was just a shell. But the act of reclaiming dignity, of carving out space where she'd grow up knowing her mother couldn't erase me, that mattered. That changed everything. Mid-January, my son called. His voice was quieter than I remembered. He asked if we could meet. We sat on a frozen bench by the lake. The wind bit at our faces, carrying the smell of cold water and iron. Ducks skidded across patches of ice, their wings flapping, their balance imperfect, but determined. "I'm sorry," he said. I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch. "I let it go too far," he continued. His hands rubbed against each other, raw from the cold. "I knew she was pushing things, but I didn't think you'd leave." "I didn't leave," I said finally. "I was removed." Quietly. Strategically. He nodded, his breath clouding in the air. "I know." We sat together in the hush of the lake, a father and son, both too stubborn to fill the silence with unnecessary words. "I miss you," he said eventually. "So does Emily." "She's always welcome," I told him. "You are too." "And Lexi?" I laughed, low, not unkind. "She's got a key to a house she can't control." That's enough power for one lifetime. A month later, he came to me alone. His face was thinner, his voice softer. He told me he was considering separation, said Lexi had turned cold, mean, obsessed with winning battles no one else was even fighting. Said he wanted Emily raised with warmth, not manipulation. I didn't tell him what to do. I only reminded him of what Ruth used to say when life felt like a trap. Silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's permission. He squeezed my hand before leaving, and for the first time in years, I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, the boy who trusted me. Now, when I drive past the old house, I don't slow down. I glance once, just long enough to see the porch, the windows, the fake flower pots Lexi insisted on keeping through every season. But I don't ache. It's just a house, a structure of wood and stone. The soul left when Ruth did. These days I sit by the condo window most evenings, a journal resting on my lap, a pot of tea warming on the table. The snow drifts outside, softening the city, erasing sharp edges. Sometimes Emily calls from the living room, asking for a snack. Sometimes I hear her humming, bent over Lego castles spread across the rug. Sometimes, on the very quiet nights, I hear Ruth's voice in my head. "You did good, Walt. You didn't yell. You didn't beg. You just stood tall." And I realize something no one tells you about getting older. You don't lose your power. You just forget where you put it. Until someone tries to take it away. Then you remember. And when the moment comes, when the chance arrives to reclaim what they thought they stripped from you, you don't hesitate. You take it, and you smile. Because the burden became the boundary. And the man they thought they could erase, well, he rewrote the ending. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.